I got the call on a Tuesday. My mother was dead. The social worker on the other end of the line spoke in that rehearsed, sympathetic tone they teach you in training. Ms. Chen? I'm calling from Mercy General Hospital. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your mother, Patricia Chen, passed away this morning at 6:47 a.m. She had you listed as her emergency contact, though the file notes indicated limited contact. Limited contact. That's one way to put it. I hadn't spoken to my mother in 30 years. Not a single word. Not a phone call on Christmas. Not a birthday card. Not even when my father, my real father, died, and I knew she'd want to come to the funeral. I made sure she wasn't invited. And now she was gone. The social worker continued, her voice filling the silence I couldn't. She'd been in declining health for some time. Congestive heart failure. She was alone when she passed. Peaceful, the nurses said. Alone. That word hung in the air like smoke after a fire. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. I should have felt something. Grief. Regret. That Hollywood moment where the estranged child breaks down and wishes they'd reconciled. But I felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt vindication. She died alone because she chose to die alone. 30 years ago, she made a choice. And I made mine. Ms. Chen? Are you still there? I'm here. There are some arrangements that need to be made. She didn't have a will, and you're her only living relative. If you could come down to the hospital. I'll handle it, I said, cutting her off. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat. Detached. Give me the details. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. The morning light streamed through the window, catching dust particles in the air. My coffee had gone cold. Somewhere outside, a neighbor was mowing their lawn. Life, continuing on as if the world hadn't just tilted slightly on its axis. My husband found me there an hour later. Babe? Marcus's voice was soft as he entered the kitchen. He took one look at my face and knew. What happened? She's dead. He didn't need to ask who. In 22 years of marriage, I'd only ever referred to one person as she with that particular tone. He moved behind me, his hands on my shoulders, solid and warm. I'm sorry, he said, because that's what you say. I'm not. He squeezed my shoulders gently. Marcus knew the story. He'd held me through the nightmares, the therapy sessions, the PTSD episodes that came out of nowhere. He'd seen me flinch at raised voices and lock every door compulsively and check on our kids 5 times a night when they were babies because I couldn't shake the fear that someone might hurt them the way I'd been hurt. You want to talk about it? He asked. No, I said. Then, after a beat, yes. Maybe. I don't know. I stood up, walking to the window. Our backyard stretched out before me, the swing set we'd installed when the kids were small, the vegetable garden I'd started last spring, the oak tree Marcus and I had planted on our 10th anniversary. This was my life now. Safe. Stable. Built on foundations that couldn't crumble. But 30 years ago, I lived in a different world entirely. I need to take you back. Not because I owe anyone an explanation for cutting my mother out of my life, I don't. But because you need to understand that this isn't a story about a rebellious teenager who stopped talking to her mom over some petty argument. This isn't about me being dramatic or holding a grudge. This is about survival. And choices. And the kind of betrayal that doesn't heal with time. My childhood, before he came into the picture, was ordinary in the best way. My father, my real father, David, was a middle school math teacher. Patient, kind, the type of dad who helped with homework and showed up to every school play. My mother was a bank teller, practical and organized, always making sure bills were paid on time and dinner was on the table at 6. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in Sacramento. I had my own room painted lavender, I'd picked the color myself. There were family dinners. Movie nights. Summer vacations to Lake Tahoe where my dad would try to teach me to fish and I'd spend more time reading on the shore. I was happy. Then I was 12, and my father had a heart attack. He died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Just like that. Gone. The man who'd kissed me goodnight every single night of my life was suddenly not there anymore. The funeral was a blur. I remember the casket being too shiny, too impersonal for someone like my dad. I remember my mother's hand in mine, cold and trembling. I remember thinking that this couldn't be real, that I'd wake up and he'd be making pancakes in the kitchen, asking if I wanted chocolate chips or blueberries. But I didn't wake up. And the pancakes never came. What followed was a year of grief so heavy I could barely breathe under the weight of it. My mother withdrew into herself. She went through the motions, work, home, sleep, but she wasn't really there. We were both drowning in the same ocean, and neither of us knew how to save the other. I don't blame her for that grief. Loss does strange things to people. I understand that now, as an adult who's experienced my own share of heartbreak. But what came next? That, I'll never forgive. 18 months after my father died, my mother started dating again. His name was Richard. Even now, decades later, I can't say his name without my stomach clenching. I can't write it without my hand tightening around the pen. That name carries so much weight, so much poison, that it feels like it should be crossed out of existence entirely. But this story doesn't work if I pretend he didn't exist. Richard. He was 42 when he met my mother. She was 37. I was 13. He worked in construction, had a deep voice, and drove a pickup truck with a dent in the passenger door. My mother met him at a church singles mixer. She'd started going to church after my father died, looking for community, for purpose, for anything to fill the void. And Richard was charming. God, he was charming. I remember the first time she brought him home for dinner. He showed up with flowers for her and a board game for me, Clue, because my mother had told him I liked mysteries. He smiled wide, shook my hand firmly, and called me kiddo in a way that felt almost paternal. Your mom's told me so much about you, he said, settling into the chair at our dinner table like he belonged there. Straight A student, huh? That's impressive. You must get that from your dad. It was the perfect thing to say. Acknowledging my father, not trying to replace him. My mother beamed. I was cautiously optimistic. I wanted my mother to be happy again. I wanted to see her smile the way she used to. And if Richard could do that, if he could bring some light back into our dark house, then maybe this could be okay. For the first 3 months, it was okay. Richard came over for dinner twice a week. He fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom and the broken step on the front porch. He asked about my school day and listened when I talked about the science fair project I was working on. He brought my mother flowers and made her laugh. She started wearing makeup again. Started humming while she cooked. He's good to us, she told me one night after he'd gone home. We were washing dishes together, her hands sudsy, her voice hopeful. Don't you think? Yeah, I said, because at 13, I still believed that good people stayed good. I think so. They got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, just a few friends from church. I was the maid of honor. I wore a pale blue dress and held my mother's bouquet while she and Richard exchanged vows. She cried happy tears. He kissed her gently. Everyone clapped. Richard moved into our house that weekend. And everything changed. The shift wasn't immediate. That's what people don't understand about abuse. It doesn't announce itself with sirens and flashing lights. It creeps in slowly, so gradually that you don't realize you're in danger until you're already trapped. First, it was small things. Richard started commenting on my appearance. You're getting curvy, kiddo. Better watch what you eat, boys don't like girls who let themselves go. This, while I was eating a bowl of cereal. He started making jokes that weren't funny. Sensitive much, he'd say when I didn't laugh. You need to lighten up. He started coming into my room without knocking. Just checking on you, he'd say, standing in the doorway, even when I was changing clothes or getting ready for bed. I started locking my door. My mother noticed. Why are you locking your door? We're family now. Richard lives here. I like privacy, I said. Don't be rude, she said. He's trying to be a good father to you. But he wasn't trying to be a father. I realized that the first time he touched me. I was 14. It was a Saturday afternoon. My mother had gone to the grocery store. Richard and I were home alone, something that had started happening more frequently. He always seemed to arrange his schedule so he'd be there when she wasn't. I was in the living room, doing homework on the couch. He sat down next to me. Too close. His thigh pressed against mine. Whatcha working on? He asked. Algebra, I said, shifting slightly away. He moved closer. You're a smart girl. Pretty, too. My skin crawled. Thanks, I mumbled, keeping my eyes on my textbook. His hand landed on my knee. I froze. You're growing up so fast, he said, his voice lower now. Different. His hand moved up slightly, his thumb rubbing small circles on my leg. I need to finish my homework, I said, my voice shaking. Don't be like that. His hand squeezed. I'm just being affectionate. That's what families do. I stood up abruptly, my textbook falling to the floor. I'm going to my room. He laughed. Not a mean laugh, worse, a dismissive one. Like I was being silly. Overreacting. Suit yourself, kiddo. I locked myself in my room and cried. Not loud, shaking sobs, quiet, confused tears. Because I didn't know what had just happened. I didn't have the language for it yet. I just knew it felt wrong. When my mother came home, I almost told her. Almost. I came downstairs, where she was unpacking groceries. Richard was helping her, chatting about his day at work, normal and cheerful. Mom, I started. Can I talk to you? Of course, sweetie. What's up? Richard was right there. Smiling at me. That same charming smile he'd had the first night I met him. Never mind, I said. It's nothing. It wasn't nothing. Over the next year, Richard's behavior escalated in a way that was methodical, calculated. He was testing boundaries, seeing what he could get away with. The touches became more frequent. A hand on my shoulder that lingered too long. A hug that pressed me too close against him. His hand on the small of my back when he passed behind me in the kitchen. The comments became more explicit. You're filling out nicely. You're going to break hearts looking like that. If I were 20 years younger. And always, there was the gaslighting. You're so sensitive. I'm just being friendly. You're reading too much into things. You should be grateful someone cares about you. I started avoiding being alone with him. I stayed late at school for clubs I didn't care about. I went to friends' houses as often as possible. I took long showers and locked my door and developed insomnia because I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My grades started slipping. I became withdrawn, anxious. My mother noticed but misread all the signs. Are you okay? She asked one evening. You seem different lately. This was my chance. I could tell her. I should tell her. It's Richard, I began. Her face changed immediately. Defensive. What about Richard? He makes me uncomfortable. Uncomfortable how? I struggled to find words. How do you explain something when you're being told constantly that you're imagining it? The way he talks to me. The way he touches me. Touches you? My mother's voice was sharp now. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, I'm telling you. Richard has been nothing but good to you. To us. He saved us, do you understand that? After your father died, I was drowning. We were drowning. And Richard pulled us out. He's provided for us, he's been patient with you even when you're moody and difficult. I'm not being difficult. He touches me and it's not normal. He's your stepfather. Of course he touches you. That's what parents do. They hug their children, they show affection. You need to stop this right now. I stared at her. Really looked at her. And I saw something in her eyes that terrified me more than anything Richard had done. She knew. On some level, maybe even subconsciously, she knew. And she was choosing not to see it. You're 14, she continued, her voice gentler now but still firm. I know this age is confusing. I know you're dealing with hormones and your father's death and adjusting to a new family dynamic. But you cannot make accusations like this. Do you understand? These kinds of accusations ruin lives. What about my life? I whispered. Don't be dramatic, she said. And then she walked away. I learned a crucial lesson that night. I was on my own. The abuse got worse. I'm not going to detail every incident. I don't need to make you live through what I lived through. But I need you to understand the scope of it. It went on for 3 more years. 3 years of being cornered, groped, fondled. 3 years of him coming into my room at night, sitting on the edge of my bed, touching me while I pretended to be asleep because fighting back only made it last longer. 3 years of him whispering things that made my skin crawl, his breath hot on my neck. 3 years of my mother pretending not to notice. Because she did notice. She had to notice. She noticed when I stopped eating dinner with them, when I started losing weight because food made me nauseous. She noticed when I flinched every time Richard came near me. She noticed when I begged her not to leave me alone with him, when I made up excuses to stay at friends' houses or locked myself in the bathroom for hours. She noticed all of it. And she did nothing. Worse than nothing, she enabled him. Stop being so cold to Richard, she'd say. He's your father now. Give him a hug goodnight. Don't be rude. Why are you always locked in your room? That's not healthy. You need to spend time with the family. She made me vulnerable. She delivered me to him on a silver platter, over and over again, because admitting what was happening would mean admitting she'd made a mistake. That she'd brought a monster into our home. That she'd chosen him over me. And she wasn't willing to do that. The final incident happened 2 weeks before my 17th birthday. I was in my room, door locked as always, studying for my SATs. My mother had gone to visit her sister for the weekend, Aunt Linda, who lived 3 hours away. She'd asked if I wanted to come. No, I'd said immediately. I have too much studying. She'd looked disappointed but hadn't pushed. Which meant she was leaving me alone with Richard for an entire weekend. I'd already made plans to stay at my friend Jessica's house. I'd told my mother I was staying home. I was going to wait until Richard left for his usual Saturday errands, then I'd slip out. But Richard stayed home. Around 10 p.m., I heard his footsteps in the hallway. Stopping outside my door. The handle turned. Locked. Kiddo, he said, his voice syrupy. Open up. I'm sleeping, I called out. No, you're not. I can see your light under the door. Come on, open up. I want to talk to you. I'm tired. We can talk tomorrow. A pause. Then, open this door right now, or I'm going to take it off the hinges. My heart hammered. He'd never been this direct before. Always played the game of plausible deniability. But my mother wasn't here. There were no witnesses. I didn't open the door. I heard him walk away. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd given up. Then I heard him in the garage. The sound of tools clattering. And I realized, he was serious. He was going to break down my door. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need help, I whispered. My stepfather, he's trying to break into my room. I'm scared. Please send someone. What's your address? I gave it to her. She kept me on the line, her voice calm and professional, while I listened to Richard working on my door hinges. The top hinge came loose. They're 2 minutes away, the dispatcher said. Stay on the line with me. 60 seconds later, the bottom hinge started to give. 30 seconds after that, red and blue lights flooded through my window, and I heard pounding on the front door. Police! Open up! Everything happened fast after that. Richard opened the front door, all charm and confusion. Officers, what's this about? Is something wrong? They came upstairs. Saw my door hanging crooked on its remaining hinge, the screwdriver in Richard's hand, me barricaded in my room with a chair against the door and tears streaming down my face. They asked me questions. Gentle but direct. I told them. Not everything, I couldn't find the words for everything, but enough. Has he hurt you? Yes. Touched you inappropriately? Yes. How many times? I don't know. A lot. 4 years. Richard was arrested that night. Charged with sexual assault of a minor, attempted breaking and entering, child endangerment. I was taken to the hospital for an examination that made me feel more violated than anything Richard had done. Then I was placed with a social worker while they tried to contact my mother. She came back the next day. I expected her to hold me. To apologize. To break down and promise she'd protect me now, that she hadn't known, that she'd fix this. Instead, she walked into that hospital room and said, "How could you do this?" I stared at her. At the woman who was supposed to protect me. Who was supposed to believe me. Who was supposed to put me first, always, no matter what. What? I said, my voice hoarse from crying. You called the police on Richard. You had him arrested. Do you have any idea what you've done? The social worker in the room stepped forward. Mrs. Chen, perhaps we should. Stay out of this, my mother snapped. She turned back to me, her face twisted with something between anger and desperation. He's sitting in a jail cell right now. Our neighbors saw him being taken away in handcuffs. Everyone's going to know. Everyone's going to think. Think what? I asked, my voice rising. Think he's a child molester? He is. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. He's been touching me for years, and you knew. You knew and you did nothing. I didn't know anything. You never, you're confused, you're. I told you. I screamed. The social worker tried to calm me, but I couldn't stop. 3 years of silence erupted out of me like a dam breaking. I told you when I was 14. I told you he made me uncomfortable, that he touched me, and you said I was being dramatic. You told me to give him a hug goodnight. You left me alone with him. You knew. My mother's face crumbled. For a moment, I thought I'd broken through. That she'd finally admit the truth, that she'd chosen him over me, that her fear of being alone had mattered more than my safety. Instead, she said, he was going to propose. Silence. What? I whispered. Richard. He bought a ring. He was going to adopt you legally. Make us a real family. We were going to have a fresh start, and you've ruined it. You've ruined everything. I felt something inside me die in that moment. Some last thread of hope that maybe, somehow, my mother would choose me. But she'd already made her choice. She'd been making it over and over for 3 years. Get out, I said quietly. Don't talk to me like that. I'm your mother. You're not my mother. My mother died with my father. You're just the woman who let a monster hurt me because you were too selfish and too weak to be alone. She sucked in a breath. I won't listen to this. You're coming home with me right now. No, I said. I'm never coming home. I'm never seeing you again. And if you try to make me, I'll tell everyone. Every neighbor, every person at your church, every single person who thought Richard was such a great guy, I'll tell them all exactly what he did and exactly how you let him do it. You're 17 years old. You don't have a choice. Mrs. Chen, the social worker, interjected firmly. Given the circumstances and the charges pending against your husband, I don't think it's appropriate for your daughter to return to your home. We'll be looking at alternative arrangements. My mother's face went white. Then red. Then she turned on her heel and walked out of that hospital room without another word. I didn't see her again for 30 years. The legal process was long and ugly. Richard's lawyer tried to paint me as a troubled teenager, acting out because I resented my stepfather replacing my dead father. They brought up my declining grades, my withdrawn behavior, my moody disposition, all the symptoms of abuse, and tried to use them as evidence that I was an unreliable witness. But I wasn't the only witness. Once I came forward, others did too. 2 other girls, both daughters of women Richard had dated before my mother. Similar stories. Similar patterns. He had a type, widows or divorcees with teenage daughters. Vulnerable women he could charm, vulnerable girls he could groom. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard took a plea deal. 15 years. He'd serve at least 10 with good behavior. My mother stood by him through the entire trial. She sat in the courtroom every day, behind the defense table, her face stony. When the other victims testified, she shook her head like she didn't believe them. When I testified, describing in clinical detail what he'd done to me, my voice shaking but steady, she looked away. After the sentencing, she tried to approach me in the hallway. My temporary guardian, Jessica's mother Mrs. Reeves, stepped between us. You need to leave, Mrs. Reeves said firmly. She's my daughter, my mother said. I have rights. You had rights. You forfeited them when you chose a child predator over your own child. Go home, Patricia. My mother looked at me over Mrs. Reeves' shoulder. Her eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if she'd been crying for Richard or for herself. Certainly not for me. You'll regret this, she said. One day you'll understand that I was only trying to keep our family together. You'll regret throwing it all away. The only thing I regret, I said coldly, is that I didn't call the police sooner. She left. And that was that. I lived with Jessica's family for my senior year of high school. The Reeves were good people. They didn't try to replace my parents, didn't ask me to be grateful for basic kindness. They just gave me a safe place to land while I figured out how to rebuild my life from rubble. Mrs. Reeves was a paralegal. She helped me apply for emancipation and for victims' compensation that paid for therapy. She helped me fill out college applications and FAFSA forms, navigating all the complications of being technically not an orphan but functionally without parents. I threw myself into school with the kind of desperate intensity of someone who knows education is the only way out. I brought my GPA back up. I aced my SATs on the second try. I applied to colleges as far from Sacramento as possible. I got into Boston University with a full scholarship. I left California the day after graduation and didn't look back. College was where I learned to be a person again. It wasn't easy. I had nightmares. Panic attacks when men stood too close to me on the subway. A knee-jerk distrust of authority figures, especially male ones. I went through phases of being hypersexual and then completely shut down. I sabotaged relationships because intimacy terrified me. But I also had therapy. Good therapy, with a trauma specialist who helped me understand that what happened to me wasn't my fault. That my mother's betrayal was her failure, not mine. That I could build a life worth living despite it all. I made friends, real friends who didn't know my history unless I chose to share it. I discovered I was good at psychology, perhaps unsurprisingly. I liked understanding why people did the terrible things they did. It gave me a sense of control. I met Marcus in my junior year. He was in my abnormal psychology class, always sitting in the back, making witty comments under his breath that made me smile despite myself. He asked me out for coffee to study. We both knew it wasn't really about studying, and I said yes because something about him felt safe. He had kind eyes. Patient hands. He didn't push when I said I wanted to take things slow. When I finally told him my history, 6 months into dating, he didn't treat me like broken glass. He just said, "Thank you for trusting me with that," and held my hand. We got married 2 years after graduation. Small ceremony, just friends. No family on my side because I had no family. Marcus's parents were there, warm, loving people who welcomed me without prying into why my own parents weren't present. His mother, Helen, became the closest thing I had to a mom. She taught me to bake, called me every Sunday, sent care packages when I was stressed. She never tried to fill the void my mother left, she just offered what she could, and I gratefully accepted. Life moved forward. I got my master's in social work. Started working with at-risk youth, helping teenagers who'd experienced trauma similar to mine. Marcus became a high school history teacher. We bought a small house in a suburb of Boston with a backyard and good schools. We had 2 kids, Emma and Tyler. And the day Emma was born, as I held that tiny, perfect human in my arms, I made a promise, I would never, ever choose anyone over my children. Not a partner. Not my own comfort. Not anything. They would always be safe with me. Over the years, my mother tried to reach out. The first letter came when I was 25. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope. My hand shook as I held it, debating whether to open it or throw it away. Marcus stood beside me. "Do you want me to read it first?" I nodded. He opened it, scanned the contents, and his jaw tightened. "She wants to reconcile. Says Richard's in prison, she's divorced him, she's sorry for everything that happened. She wants to meet." Everything that happened, I repeated. Like it was a natural disaster. Not her choices. "You want me to respond?" "No." "Throw it away." More letters came over the years. Sometimes she sent them to my work, I don't know how she found me, but she was persistent. Each letter was a variation on the same theme, she was sorry, she'd made mistakes, she wanted another chance, didn't I miss having a mother? I never responded. When I was 30, she somehow got my phone number. She called at 2 a.m., drunk, crying. "Please, baby, please. I'm so alone. I have no one. You're all I have left." "You had me," I said, my voice ice. "You had me, and you threw me away for him. Don't ever call this number again." I blocked her. Changed my number. Made sure every online profile was private. When I was 35, she showed up at my work. I was in the middle of a session with a client when the receptionist buzzed in. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman here claiming to be your mother. She says it's an emergency." My blood ran cold. "Tell her I'm not available. Tell her not to come back." But she didn't leave. She waited in the parking lot for 2 hours until my shift ended. When I walked out to my car, there she was, older and grayer but unmistakably her. "Please," she said, approaching me. "Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You have 30 seconds before I call security. Use them wisely." She flinched. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I failed you. But I've changed. I'd been in therapy. I've done the work to understand what I did wrong. 20 seconds. I'm your mother. You can't just erase me from your life. Watch me. 10 seconds. I'm dying. I stopped. What? Congestive heart failure. The doctors say I have maybe 5 years. I don't want to die without making peace with you. For a moment, just a moment. I felt something. A flicker of that little girl who'd wanted her mother to save her. Then I remembered, she already had a chance to save me. Multiple chances. She chose not to. Then die, I said. Die knowing that you could have had a daughter who loved you, who would have cared for you, who would have held your hand at the end. But you traded that for him. That was your choice. Live with it. Or don't. I don't care. I got in my car and drove away. She didn't follow. And now, here I was, 30 years later, standing in my kitchen while Marcus held me, and she was dead. The funeral was 3 days away. As her only living relative, I'd been forced to make arrangements. I'd chosen the cheapest option, cremation, no service, no flowers. I'd signed the papers with a steady hand and written a check without emotion. Are you going to the cremation? Marcus asked. I have to. I'm the next of kin. I meant, do you want to? You don't owe her anything. I know. But I need to. I need to see it through. To know it's really over. My kids knew I had a mother I didn't speak to. They knew, in vague terms, that she'd hurt me when I was young. Emma, now 20 and home from college for the summer, found me in the kitchen that evening. Mom? Her voice was soft. Dad told me about Grandma. I tensed. My children had never met my mother. They knew Marcus's parents as their only grandparents. Yeah. Are you okay? Honestly? I don't know what I am. Emma sat down across from me. She looked so much like I had at her age, dark hair, thoughtful eyes. But she carried herself with a confidence I'd never had at 20. Because she'd grown up safe. Loved. Protected. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Do you regret cutting her off? Even a little bit? I considered the question carefully. Emma deserved honesty. No. I don't regret protecting myself from someone who hurt me. But I do feel complicated about it. Grief for what could have been. Anger at what was. Relief that I don't have to fight that battle anymore. That makes sense. She reached across the table, taking my hand. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. You broke a cycle. You gave Tyler and me a childhood you never got. That matters. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. Do you want company? At the cremation? I shook my head. No. This is something I need to do alone. The crematorium was small, clinical, tucked into an industrial park on the outskirts of the city. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in my car, staring at the building. What was I supposed to feel? What was the appropriate emotion for the death of someone who was biologically your mother but emotionally your enemy? A grief counselor I'd seen years ago had once told me that abuse complicated grief in unique ways. That it was possible to mourn not the person who died, but the person they should have been. The mother who should have protected you. The relationship you should have had. Maybe that's what I was doing here. Mourning a ghost of what might have been. I walked inside. A somber employee with a clipboard greeted me. Ms. Chen? Yes. We're ready whenever you are. You're welcome to view the body before the cremation, if you'd like. Some people find it brings closure. Did I want to see her? I'd spent 3 decades avoiding even photographs of her. Yes, I heard myself say. I'd like to see her. He led me to a small viewing room. She lay in a simple casket, wearing a blue dress I didn't recognize. Her face was pale, waxy, peaceful in death in a way she'd never been in life. She looked small. That's what struck me most. This woman who had loomed so large in my life, who'd had the power to destroy me, looked so small and fragile and ordinary. I approached the casket slowly. Looked down at her. I don't know what to say to you, I said quietly. No one else was in the room. Just me and her corpse. Part of me wants to scream at you. Part of me wants to cry. Part of me wants to feel nothing at all. She didn't respond. Of course she didn't. You were supposed to protect me. That was your one job as a parent. Keep me safe. Choose me. And you didn't. You chose him. Over and over, you chose him. My hands gripped the edge of the casket. Do you know what that did to me? Do you have any idea? I spent years in therapy learning how to trust people again. Learning that not everyone would hurt me. Learning that I deserved to be loved and safe. You should have taught me those things. Instead, I had to teach myself. My voice cracked. I have children now. A daughter Emma's age, the age I was when Richard started touching me. And I look at her, and I cannot fathom. I cannot comprehend how you could have known and done nothing. If anyone ever touched my children, I would burn the world down. There is no one, no partner, no friend, no one, I would choose over them. That's what a mother does. Tears fell now, hot and unexpected. You died alone because you deserved to die alone. Because you made choices that led to this. And I don't forgive you. I won't give you that peace. But... I paused, struggling with words I'd never expected to say. But I release you. I release myself from the weight of hating you. I release the girl I was from needing your love. I survived despite you, and I built a beautiful life. You don't get credit for that. But you also don't get to haunt me anymore. I stepped back from the casket. Goodbye, Patricia. I walked out of that room and nodded to the attendant. I'm ready. I didn't watch the cremation. I signed the papers, took the urn. I'd scatter the ashes somewhere unremarkable, maybe a public park, and drove home. Marcus was waiting for me on the porch. He didn't ask how it went. He just held me while I cried for the mother I'd never had and the childhood I'd never gotten and the 30 years of silence that had been both a wound and a shield. It's over, I whispered into his shoulder. Yeah, he said. It's over. A week later, I received a call from a lawyer. Ms. Chen? I'm handling your mother's estate. There's not much, she didn't have significant assets, but she did leave a letter for you. It was in her safety deposit box with instructions to deliver it after her death. My stomach dropped. I don't want it. I understand. But I'm legally obligated to offer it to you. What you do with it after that is your choice. He mailed it. I let it sit on my desk for 3 days before I opened it. The letter was dated 2 years before her death. Her handwriting was shaky. The heart failure, probably, but legible. Dear Claire. Asterisk, I know you won't want to read this. You've made it clear over the years that you want nothing to do with me. I respect that. I don't like it, but I respect it, asterisk. Asterisk, I'm writing this because I'm dying, and I need to say things I should have said 30 years ago. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just need you to know the truth, asterisk. You were right about everything. Asterisk, Richard was a monster. I knew it. Deep down, in a place I was too cowardly to acknowledge, I knew something was wrong from the beginning. The way he looked at you. The way he found excuses to be alone with you. The way you changed, withdrawn, scared, jumping at shadows, asterisk. I knew. Asterisk, and I did nothing because I was terrified of being alone again. After your father died, I felt like I was drowning. The grief was suffocating. And Richard made me feel alive again. Wanted. Important. He filled the void your father left, and I clung to that like a lifeline, asterisk. Asterisk, when you told me he made you uncomfortable, I chose not to believe you. Not because I thought you were lying, but because believing you would mean admitting I'd brought danger into our home. It would mean I'd failed you as a mother. It would mean I'd have to leave him and go back to being alone asterisk. I was so terrified of being alone that I sacrificed you to avoid it. Asterisk I watched you suffer for 3 years. I watched you fade away, and I told myself it wasn't real. That you were being dramatic. That it was normal teenage stuff. I invented 1,000 excuses because the truth was too painful to face asterisk. Asterisk when you called the police, part of me was relieved. Because the decision was taken out of my hands. I didn't have to be the one to end it, you ended it for both of us. But I was also furious. At you, for forcing me to see what I'd been hiding from. At myself, for being weak. At Richard, for being exactly who you tried to tell me he was asterisk. Asterisk I stood by him during the trial because I didn't know what else to do. I'd already lost you. I'd already lost everything. Standing by him was the only thing that made sense in my shattered world asterisk. Asterisk I divorced him a year after he went to prison. I've lived alone ever since. No more men. No more relationships. Just me and the ghosts of my failures asterisk. Asterisk I tried to reach out to you over the years. Not because I thought I deserved your forgiveness, but because I needed you to know I was sorry. That I'd been wrong. That you'd been right all along asterisk. Asterisk but you were right to shut me out. You were right to protect yourself from me. Because I hurt you in the worst way a mother can hurt a child, I chose someone else over you when you needed me most asterisk. Asterisk I'm dying now. Congestive heart failure. I have maybe a year left. I'm going to die alone, and that's what I deserve. But before I go, I need you to know asterisk. You were a wonderful daughter. None of this was your fault. You deserved better than me. I'm proud of the woman you became despite me, not because of me. I love you, even though I failed to show it when it mattered. Asterisk I don't expect you to read this at my funeral. I don't expect you to cry for me or mourn me or remember me fondly. But if there's any part of you that's carried guilt or shame or doubt, please let it go. You did nothing wrong. You survived. And that's everything asterisk. Goodbye, my sweet girl. Mom. I read the letter 3 times. Each time, I felt something different. Anger. Sadness. A strange, hollow relief. She'd known. She'd admitted it. Finally, after all these years, she'd told the truth. Did it change anything? No. The abuse still happened. The trauma still existed. Her confession didn't undo any of it. But it did one thing, it killed the tiny, stubborn part of me that had wondered if maybe I'd been wrong. If maybe I'd overreacted. If maybe I should have tried harder to maintain a relationship with her. Now I knew for certain, I'd been right to cut her off. She'd known what was happening and had chosen not to stop it. That was unforgivable. But I also felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I was carrying. She'd died alone because of her choices, not because I was a bad daughter. I'd done nothing wrong. I took the letter to my next therapy session. My therapist, Dr. Morrison, read it carefully while I sat in the chair across from her, picking at a loose thread on the armrest. How do you feel? She asked when she finished. Validated, I said. Angry. Sad. All of it at once. Do you feel any differently about cutting her off? No. She made her choices. I made mine. This letter doesn't change that. Do you think you'll keep it? I considered. Yeah. I think I will. Not because I forgive her. But because it's proof. When that little voice in my head tries to tell me I was too harsh or too cold or too unforgiving, I can read this and remember, I protected myself from someone who admitted she knowingly failed to protect me. Dr. Morrison nodded. Closure doesn't always look the way we expect it to. This isn't closure, I said. This is just the end of a chapter. The rest of my life is still mine to write. I scattered my mother's ashes on a Tuesday afternoon, in a small public park near the crematorium. No ceremony. No words. I just opened the urn, poured her out into the wind, and walked away. Marcus was waiting in the car. All done? All done. We drove home in comfortable silence. When we arrived, Emma and Tyler were in the kitchen making dinner, some ambitious pasta dish they'd found on the internet. The house smelled like garlic and tomato sauce. Normal. Safe. Home. Emma looked up when we walked in. Hey Mom. We're making dinner. It's probably going to be terrible, but we tried. I hugged her. I'm sure it'll be perfect. Tyler, 17 and gangly, rolled his eyes with the kind of teenage affection I'd never been able to show my own parents. She cried when she cut the onions. For like 20 minutes. They were really strong onions. Emma protested. Marcus laughed, joining them at the stove. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching my family bicker and cook and just exist together in this beautiful, ordinary way. This was what I'd built. Not despite my mother's failure, but in defiant opposition to it. I'd broken the cycle. People sometimes ask me if I regret cutting my mother off. If I wish I'd reconciled before she died. If I carry guilt about her dying alone. The answer is always no. Here's what I've learned. You don't owe your abuser forgiveness. You don't owe your enabler a relationship. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they share your DNA. My mother made a choice. She chose a man who was abusing me over her own daughter. She made that choice every single day for 3 years. And when I finally escaped, she doubled down, standing by him even after he was convicted. I made a choice too. I chose myself. I chose my safety. I chose to build a life without someone who'd proven they couldn't be trusted with my well-being. Those were both choices, and we both lived with the consequences. She died alone because she destroyed the only relationship that might have been there at the end. That's not my fault. That's not my burden to carry. I spent years in therapy learning that lesson. Learning that protecting yourself isn't cruel. That setting boundaries isn't punishment. That walking away from toxicity isn't abandonment, it's survival. And I survived. More than survived, I thrived. I have a career helping kids who went through what I went through. I have a marriage built on trust and honesty and genuine partnership. I have children who will never know the fear I knew, because I made sure of it. I have friends who are my chosen family. I have hobbies and interests and a full, rich life. My mother missed all of it. Every graduation, every milestone, every moment of joy. She could have been part of it. All she had to do was choose me. She didn't. And that's on her. I still think about her sometimes. Usually when Emma does something that reminds me of myself at that age. Or when I'm working with a client whose mother failed them the way mine failed me. I think about how different things could have been if she'd just listened when I first told her. If she'd believed me. If she'd chosen me over her fear of being alone. But dwelling on what if is pointless. This is the reality I live in. And in this reality, I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I never thought possible when I was that terrified teenager trapped in that house with a monster and a mother who wouldn't save me. The nightmares are rare now. The panic attacks almost never happen. I can be in a room with men without automatically calculating escape routes. I can trust people. I can love people. I can be intimate without dissociating. That's my revenge, if you want to call it that. Not that she died alone, though there's a certain poetic justice in that. My revenge is that I healed. I became everything she could have been and wasn't. I broke every chain she tried to put on me. I won. Last month, Emma told me she's thinking about becoming a therapist. I want to help people the way you help people, she said. I want to be there for kids who need someone to believe them. I cried. Happy tears this time. You'll be amazing at it, I told her. Did Grandma inspire you to do this work? The one we don't talk about? I paused, considering how to answer. In a way. She showed me what not to be. And sometimes, knowing what not to be is just as important as knowing what to be. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I get that. I think what you went through made you really good at seeing people who are hurting. And at believing them when they tell you something's wrong. That's exactly right. I'm sorry you had to go through that to learn it, though. Me too, baby. Me too. But I'm glad something good came from it. I'm glad you and Tyler grew up safe. That's all I ever wanted. She hugged me. We did. We do. You're a really good mom, you know that? And there it was. The thing I'd needed to hear my whole life, finally said by someone who mattered. So here's where I am now, 6 months after my mother's death. I don't miss her. I don't feel guilty. I don't wish things had been different, because wishing doesn't change anything. What I feel is free. For 30 years, I've carried the weight of that relationship, or the absence of it. The anger, the hurt, the complicated tangle of emotions that comes from being betrayed by someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally. Now she's gone, and that weight is gone too. I didn't need her to die to move on with my life, I'd already done that decades ago. But her death closed a door I hadn't realized was still slightly ajar. The door labeled, maybe someday she'll really understand what she did, or maybe someday she'll truly apologize, or maybe someday this will make sense. That door is closed now. Locked. Sealed. And I'm okay with that. I want to be clear about something, because I know some people will judge my choices. They'll say I should have forgiven her. That everyone deserves a second chance. That holding grudges only hurts yourself. That she was my mother and I should have been there for her at the end. To those people, I say this. You don't get to judge someone else's healing journey. You don't get to dictate what forgiveness should look like for someone who's been through trauma. You don't get to decide what's enough suffering to justify cutting off a family member. Forgiveness is not owed. It's given freely, or not at all. And you can forgive someone without maintaining a relationship with them. You can release anger without inviting your abuser back into your life. I released my mother. I stopped letting her actions define me. But I didn't, and don't, owe her a relationship. Some bridges are burned for a reason. And it's okay to let them stay burned. The other day, I was cleaning out the garage and found a box of old photos from my childhood. Pictures of me and my dad. Pictures of our family before Richard. Pictures of a little girl who didn't know yet that the world could be cruel. I sat on the garage floor for an hour, looking through them. Marcus found me there, tears streaming down my face. You okay? He asked gently. I'm sad, I said. For that little girl. For everything she lost. But I'm also proud of her. She survived. She got out. She built this. I gestured vaguely at our house, our life. She did, Marcus agreed. And she became someone pretty remarkable. I looked at a photo of me at age 7, missing my 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera while my dad made a silly face behind me. That version of me had no idea what was coming. No idea that in 5 years, her world would shatter. If I could go back and tell her anything, what would I say? Maybe this, it's going to be bad. Worse than you can imagine. You're going to be hurt in ways that change you forever. But you're also going to be stronger than you think. You're going to survive. And one day, you're going to be happy again. Really, truly happy. Hold on. It gets better. My mother has been gone for 6 months now. In that time, I've thought about her less and less. She's becoming what she always should have been, a closed chapter in my past, rather than an open wound in my present. I don't hate her anymore. Hate requires energy, and I'm done spending energy on her. I don't miss her. I never really had her to miss. What I feel is peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you made the right choice, even when it was the hard choice. The kind of peace that comes from protecting yourself when no one else would. I cut her off for 30 years. She died alone. And I'm okay with both of those things. Because my job wasn't to make her comfortable in her choices. My job was to survive mine. And I did.